7th, 2024, and here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. FBI Director Christopher Wray resigns after more than 10 years. We'll explain the details. Detroit may be on the verge of electing its first Black female mayor. We'll discuss the two female candidates in the race. And we'll talk with Yvette Clarke, the new chair-elect of the Congressional Black Caucus from New York. Sean Combs' accuser speaks to CNN for the first time. We'll discuss the latest developments. All right, it's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, FBI Director Christopher Wray announced at a town hall that he will resign at the end of the Biden administration. Wray, who has served as the director since August 2017, is stepping aside as President-elect Donald Trump prepares to nominate a new head of the agency. In November, Trump announced his intention to nominate former FBI prosecutor Kash Patel, a vocal critic of the Bureau. Following Wray's announcement, Trump posted on social media calling it a great day for America and claiming it marks the end of the weaponization of what has become known as the U.S. Department of Injustice. All right, I'm joined now by my panel, Dr. Larry J. Walker, assistant professor at the University of Central Florida out of Orlando, Florida, and Dr. Julianne Malveaux, economist and author, and she is out of Washington, D.C. Dr. Malveaux, I want to start with you. I mean, this certainly is something that we knew was coming, probably a little earlier than expected, but there are a lot of critics about this next pick and Kash Patel's devotion and alliance and allegiance with Trump, calling him a loyalist to no end. What are your thoughts about this early decision, Dr. Malveaux?
Well, I think that Christopher Wray, nobody wants to get fired. The writing was on the wall. He was going to be fired by Mr. Trump. And so he chose to quit instead. Good for him. He actually, the reason that FBI directors have a 10-year term is it's supposed to transcend presidential terms. In other words, it's supposed to be just like the Fed and some other things that have longer terms. It's supposed to be nonpartisan. But clearly, the incoming president wanted to make it partisan. And Chris Wray saw the writing on the wall and decided, I'm not up for that. And as I said, nobody wants to be fired, although he has a lot of admiration, both within the FBI and within the legal community. He has not been partisan. He's basically been very balanced. But, Project 2025, actions have consequences. And so all these people who said, Trump's not going to do that. Well, he's doing it, y'all. FAFO. And that's just basically what's going on there. Now, this Patel person doesn't have the experience to manage this large of an agency, but he has the inclination to use it to the incoming president's favor. I try not to call his name, Candace, because I don't like to curse on the air. And so if I say incoming president, I'm avoiding a cuss word. Just saying. But in any case,
thank you for that side note, Dr. Malveaux.
Hey, just got to be me. But in any case, but what we know is that Patel has already said who he's going after and what he's going to do. And under those circumstances, I think we should all be quite frightened. Well, not frightened really, but because we've been down this path before. J. Edgar Hoover went after the Black Panther Party, went after various Black elected officials. So we know what the FBI can do. I'm hoping that somebody with good sense in the Senate says, stop. The life you save may be your own. Because just like they could go after Dems, they could possibly go after President Biden. And Biden ought to pardon himself, by the way. Just saying. Trump is going to do it, so I can't he. Never mind. I'm unleashed today. Roland's I'm unleashed. But basically, at the end of the day, we expect there to be some cataclysmic challenges, and some of those challenges are going to hit our people. Also, Liz Cheney, but a lot of black folks. A lot of black folks are going to be investigated, and so I again am hoping that there are some senators with good sense who will say, "No, we're not going there."
Dr. Malveaux, let me bring Dr. Walker into this conversation, piggyback off of something that you said, and that he has vowed, this Kash Patel has vowed, he was on his podcast saying, I will go after all of Trump's enemies. Dr. Walker, what do you think we should expect from this new head of the FBI?
So I think it's an important question. Dr. Malveaux made some really important points. And so I think it's a bit like, it reminds me of like letting a fox in the hen house. But
right.
in this case, he's going to be, one of the most powerful law enforcement officer in the United States. So you're right. He's been on every podcast you can think of over the last several months telling you exactly what he's going to do. It's not like these folks are trying to pretend what's not going to happen. And I want to go back to, as it relates to Patel's, nomination, and we'll see if he gets through the U.S. Senate, is Dr. Malveaux made a point about the Black Panthers and Black folks, in which I'm hoping we don't have a COINTELPRO Part 2 as it relates to this new administration. But I have a great deal of concerns because, undoubtedly we know as Black folks that there are consistently these interactions where Black people in some way are harmed by law enforcement in some way, and unfortunately 2 to 3 times more likely to be murdered. And so these incidents happen frequently in the United States. And so my concern is if and when something like this happens, what is the response? And why I'm highlighting that is that, whatever issues people might have with, soon to be former FBI Director Ray, he talked a lot about, white domestic terrorism and how, in many of these hearings when he's called before the Judiciary Committee and talking about the dangers. And obviously we see some of that play out on January 6th and, the rise of the Proud Boys the last several years, among other extremist organizations. So what happens as it relates to these extremist organizations? Are they allowed to flourish? And are Black folks are likely to see violence in our communities based on, what we saw prior during the time of Jim Crow? And I'm not certainly saying we'll relive Jim Crow, but there's a history of violence here in this country. And so I worry that, not only in terms of, Black people being over policed, but also what kind of violence can we expect to see over the next several years? And so these are the kind of things that we need to talk about. And that's why this platform is so important.
Dr. Malveaux, you mentioned just the confirmation and perhaps whether or not this will even go through. Well, what are your thoughts about this? Because we've certainly seen a lot of nominees, even right now, they're trying to figure out what their fate is. We've already had somebody who was nominated drop out, Matt Gaetz. What are your thoughts about Kash Patel and what the outcome might be in terms of him even being confirmed?
Well, he's likely to be confirmed. I hope he isn't. I think he is dangerous. But I do think that the Senate is of the mind to give the incoming president anything he wants. And by doing that, they're, Patel, Dr. Oz over Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, that's the biggest joke I've ever heard. And we go down the list. They are of the mind to give the incoming president whatever he would like. And from that perspective, you just need, 2 or 3 of them to say, this is, and it really is not only about the Black community, it's about the community writ large. And it's about the number of people who may be, come on, Liz Cheney. This is the whitest of white girls from Republican royalty. Would they go after her? Probably, if the incoming president grinds his axe, and she, of course, did vote for his impeachment. So I think that what we ought to all understand is that the Senate the Republican Party is not the Republican Party anymore. It's now Mr. Trump's party. Oh, I curse. Sorry about that. But it's his party. And so when we understand that we understand that unless there are egregious reasons to deny a nominee, they're going to go with the nominee. And so this does mean that we got to all lawyer up. Ben Crump is going to be working overtime, if not triple time. And some of our other great lawyers who Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, because we understand. And I'm so glad that Larry brought up the point about COINTELPRO and the ways that the FBI has been weaponized in the past with Black people to mess with us. And we can call Paul Robeson. We could talk about W.B. Du Bois. We could go on down the list. We could talk about Marcus Garvey. And so I'm wondering if some of our civil rights organizations are going to be targeted, if others are going to be targeted. But I am very concerned, and we all ought to be very concerned. But again, that 20% of Black men who decided that they thought that man would be an adequate president. They did the decision, but they were up in it. Those white women who I am now officially through with, dear white women, I wrote them a letter, dear white women, through with y'all. They
listen, Dr. Malvo, we like the unhinged version of you. Dr. Walker, listen, Kash Patel, former attorney, he also worked within the Obama administration. What do you think that organizations, what do you think that civil rights group, as Dr. Malvo mentioned, should be doing right now in terms of the expectations of what could potentially be happening and how to kind of head that off?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that, Dr. Malvo talked about civil rights organizations and other entities that might be impacted or care about underserved, minoritized populations have to be proactive. Listen, I worked on the Hill, and many of the things that, that were in Project 2025 were like not, I don't think Republicans ever thought that they would be at this point, but it took them decades. I'm making that point is because NAACP, various other entities, we need a short and long-term strategic plan to counter some of the challenges that, like I said, minoritized communities, particularly Black folks, are going to have to deal with in the next couple of years. And we sit idly by and just be reactionary, then we're going to find ourselves in a lot of trouble. So like I said, I'm hoping that, all these, we have a bunch of great, scholars and educators and, and attorneys on this platform right now discussing this issue. We collectively have to come together. Whether, like I said, it's certain groups that are, been around for a long time and other entities, but we've got to figure out we have to have a plan, concrete plan at the local and state level to address these challenges, because otherwise we'll find ourselves, like I said, in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, listen, as we know, the Department of Justice, they are the organization that has taken the lead in addressing what is going on at state levels. Police officers, what they're doing, going on rides with them to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of going into the community and properly seeing that everybody is safe and secure and that there is no discrimination and that people are not being stopped just because they are Black men and women in America. The Department of Justice has been leading that for a very, very long time. And I would imagine, Dr. Malvo, that is one of the key things that will actually stop. In fact, when the transition happened before from the Democratic to the Republican Party and Trump took place, Trump became president, that's exactly what happened. There was an immediate ending of those type of particular insights into local police departments.
First of all, let's give a lot of credit to Kirsten Clark, who is the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. She has done a magnificent job, and she deserves every shout out that we can give her. She's not moved the needle, but really knocked the ball out the park around these consent decrees with police officers, looking at Memphis, looking at other places. But now, of course, with the that man coming into office, the AG in Memphis in Tennessee has said, well, I don't know if we're going to sign this consent decree because we don't have to.
Right.
Now, that's exactly what he said, but pretty much we don't have to. And we see clearly the pattern and practice in Memphis and in other places. And Assistant Attorney General Clark has been meticulous in her research, meticulous in her work. And yet what we see is these folks say, I don't have to. And we just saw a case in New York City where this penny person, I said I wasn't cussing, but otherwise I would call it, never mind. I won't go there. But anyway, this guy kills a homeless man who has mental illness issues on the subway, and he gets off. And we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot more because, lynching culture, and if Roland were here, he'd start laughing now. But that's my obsession because I'm writing a book about lynching culture and reparations. But lynching culture says a white person can do whatever they want to a black person and expect no repercussions. Mm-hmm. You can kill us, you can rape us, you can steal from us. I could go on and on and on. 1896 in Paris, Texas, they asked a brother to sign over his land. And he said, no, why would he sign over his land that he worked hard to get? So they lynched him. And then they went to an older brother and lynched him too, because he wouldn't sign over his land. And the interesting thing is the journalists, so-called journalists who covered it said, well, we didn't have to lynch the old man. He was going to die anyway. This is the disregard of Black lives. This is why we have Black Lives Matter. This is why we need Black Lives Matter. And this is why in these next 2 years, I'm not going to claim 4, the next 2, we have to really be vigilant and prepared for what's getting ready to go down. Just, again, look at Project 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this is something certainly that we're going to be visiting, of course, more on this show. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on in Black America and what should matter to you. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered here live on the Black Star Network. Stay with us. We'll be back after this break.
Now streaming on the Black Star Network.
I had been trying to get a record deal for a long time. When I finally got signed to the Motown record label in 2003, I was 34, 35 years old. And up until that time, I had been trying to get record deals the traditional way. You record your demo, you record your music, and you send it, to the record labels, or maybe a friend of a friend knows somebody that works for, the record label. And really chemistry that was my last ditch effort at being in the music business.
How long have you been trying?
I've been trying since I was a teenager. Wow. And I'm grateful that it didn't. I'm grateful that it happened when it happened, because I wasn't prepared, as a teenager to embrace all that comes with a career in the music industry.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.
Henry Louis Gates says there are 42 million black people in America. Therefore, there are 42 million ways of being black.
We are not a monolithic people. We come in all different shades, sizes, everything.
For me, black excellence is the upgrade to any level of excellence.
It looks like a family who is beautiful and proud of being together, that have degrees or no degrees.
I like that it's creativity. I like that it's self-expression. I like that it's radical at times.
There we go. And
And because we've been through so much and endured so much, and
we gonna go through some things, but we don't stay in it, you know. And
the intensive labor to educate you about the systems your ancestors built is not always my obligation.
I promise you, you will love it. Comrades, join the community.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
All right. An anonymous man spoke with CNN to share for the first time the emotional and psychological toll that he says he endured from alleged abuse by Sean Diddy Combs. The man, identified as John Doe, he filed a complaint on October 14th, alleging that he was drugged and sexually assaulted by Combs at one of the music mogul's white parties nearly 2 decades ago. In his first on-camera interview, Doe disclosed that he has kept the alleged 2000 incident a secret for years. Representative for Combs declined to comment on the allegations. Doe's complaint is one of several filed by anonymous accusers represented by attorney Tony Busby and Andrew Van Arsdale. The lawyers have stated they are representing at least 120 people planning to file cases against Combs. So far, 20 civil suits have been filed. Well, Dr. Walker, I don't think that it is going to get any better. Certainly, we're going to hear simply more details that are going to be, quite frankly, tied to Jay-Z. Because when you think about Sean Combs and everything that everyone is talking about, now you're hearing the story of the two Seans.
Yeah, and so one of the things I want to say first is that we have to acknowledge that sexual violence of any kind is against the law, and those individuals should be prosecuted if found guilty. It really does. It is troubling hearing all these allegations, particularly as someone who grew up before hip hop was rap music, and when you see particularly, I'm gonna be frank, Black men, these kind of accusations are really troubling. And so you just highlighted that there's so far there have been 20 or so individuals that have literally come forward or filed charges, or some kind of civil charges, but more than 100 individuals they believe were victims of sexual assault. And that's an incredible number of people. And we also have to acknowledge that number could increase. So what I would say is that we, not only in terms of, I don't want to say it's just hip hop, because we know that, musical artists are, in the past have been, accused of various of these kind of accusations. But, we do have a general conversation about sexual violence and specifically those with power, because I think, while, Sean Combs is a Black man, and we've heard the alleged allegations relating to Jay-Z, we have to see how that plays out. But we have to have a conversation about how, power and sexual assault intersect. And then when you layer it over that, like I said, there's need to be a conversation among brothers about, if you see something, this is saying, if you see something, say something. You can't just be idly by and, watch people be victims of sexual assault. We know that so many people may have not participated, but certainly were aware of these allegations for decades and did nothing about that. And that is we can't have that kind of silence, culture of silence when it comes to sexual assault.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Malveaux, Dr. Walker brings up a very good point in that this does continue to open the door in the conversation about sexual assault. I will say it feels a little different than when we were in the height of the Me Too movement, even though certainly people are aware of what they should and should not be doing. Do you get a sense that the spirit that was behind the Me Too movement is still alive? Or are we living in a different culture now with new president several years later, and just a different lens that we might be perhaps looking at cases like this? Let's see, is Dr. Malveaux there? Dr. Walker?
Yeah, I could jump in and respond.
Okay,
no
sure.
No problem. So I'm still here. So I think that, you hit a highlighting point, really important point is relating to the Me Too movement. And listen, like I said, we have to have a conversation about sexual assault. Because, unfortunately, each year there are thousands of these cases that go unreported. And so I think that the Me Too movement is an extension, certainly, of the feminist movement and the fight for, bodily autonomy by women. But I think that, as we move forward and things evolve, just like we saw from the civil rights movement and what it is today, while we don't have the same, maybe necessarily use the same terminology to describe why these issues are important, because we have to protect individuals in our, we know, family and friends, members of our community. We have to protect them from sexual assault because, like I said, we know this happens frequently in our country, often by people very well. And so we have to have on stand that we can't allow this code of silence to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we have a little bit of sound from the person who's filing these charges. I believe I saw that pop up. If we do have that sound, we can run it now to hear what this accuser said on CNN.
According to your lawsuit, you were hired by a security firm to work security at one of the infamous white parties that was thrown by Sean Combs in the Hamptons. What was that experience like?
At first, he was incredibly friendly, very gracious.
So you had a friendly chat, and then, according to your lawsuit, at some point later in the night, Sean Combs himself offered you a drink. This didn't come from staff or someone holding a tray of drinks. It came from him directly.
Correct. The first drink started to have some effect on me. And I just thought, wow, these are really strong drinks. It wasn't until the second drink, and it was already too late, that I realized that there was something wrong with the drinks.
All right, so a few more details. I think at this point, why don't we take a little break? We'll come back and we are going to continue more with this accuser of Sean Diddy Combs and talk more about the over 100 people who could potentially come forward in addition to who are already on record filing complaints against Sean Combs. Stay with us. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered live here on the Black Star Network, and we'll be back after a break.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, Dexter Jenkins is a faith-based financial mentor with more than 20 years in the financial services industry. He's passionate about helping families build generational wealth.
Even though I'm talking about things like prayer, I'm talking about things about reading the word, I'm talking about things like fellowship, I'm talking to members who are dealing with losing their houses, or I'm talking to members who, because of a lack of the handling their finances, they're working 2 and 3 jobs. And so what I'm finding is that they're not coming to church because they don't have a handle on their finances.
We're talking how to get wealthy through faith and our finances on the next Get Wealthy right here, only on Black Star Network.
Now streaming on the Black Star Network.
I had been trying to get a record deal for a long time. When I finally got signed to the Motown record label in 2003, I was 34, 35 years old. And up until that time, I had been trying to get record deals the traditional way. You record your demo, you record your music, and you send it, to the record labels, or maybe a friend of a friend knows somebody that works for, the record label. And really chemistry that was my last ditch effort at being in the music business.
How long have you been trying?
I've been trying since I was a teenager. Wow. And I'm grateful that it didn't. I'm grateful that it happened when it happened, because I wasn't prepared, as a teenager to embrace all that comes with a career in the music industry.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it. Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
Now that Roland Martin is willing to give me the blueprint, hey, Cyrus, I need to go to Tyler Perry and get another blueprint because I need some green money. The only way I can do what I'm doing, I need to make some money. So you'll see me working with Roland. Matter of fact, it's the Roland Martin and Cheryl Underwood show. Well, should it be the Cheryl Underwood show and the Roland Martin show? Well, whatever show it's going to be good.
All right, we are back here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Before we went to the break, we were speaking about this man who came on CNN. He shared his experience and the psychological, emotional, physical abuse that he had allegedly at the hands of Sean Combs. This goes back to 2007. As we know, there have been 20 civil lawsuits that have been filed, but there have been attorneys out there filing potentially over 100 more that will be coming. We heard a little bit of sound from this man before we went to the break. Dr. Malveaux, I wanted your thoughts about this man who is coming forward, what this means for Sean Combs. And as I said before, we're now talking about two Seans. A lot of people are talking about them all in the same breath: Sean Carter, Sean Combs, and just the implications of people who will be coming forward. I'm sure there are more to come, Dr. Malveaux.
Oh, there absolutely are. What we see is that apparently just a freak show going on. People who felt like they could do whatever they want to do to other people with no consequences. I think Dr. Walker made the point earlier about needing to have a conversation about domestic violence or basically sexual abuse. I mean, the tragedy here, Candace, is that we were abused as Black people, as enslaved people. I just finished reading a blurb about a book where it talked about how white men routinely raped Black men who are enslaved. And this is something we don't really talk about. We don't really talk about sexual abuse and how it happens and the power dynamic therein. So this gentleman who's come forward, I mean, lots of people are going to have lots of things to say. You know, why did he wait so long? Well, we know why people wait so long. They're frightened. They're intimidated. They don't want to come out there. Once one person comes out, it starts cascading. And you find, well, that happened to me too. Well, that happened to me too. That's why the Me Too movement was so powerful. But I think that we in the Black community, if we put ourselves out there as more moral, more upstanding, and better, then we have to be good enough to have a conversation with our brothers, with our sisters. Women can be abusers as well. Have conversations about why this is happening, how we stop it. Jay-Z was very moving, I thought, when he talked about the fact that he has kids, that his kids are the age of these people who were abused. And he said, well, if you really think we did that, not we, because he doesn't use himself, but if this was done, then you ought to have criminal charges. And I agree with him. I mean, there is no statute limitation on rape. And so if indeed these are claims that are not baseless, bring it on. And let's expose this stuff. Let's just, people always talk about dirty laundry. Let's take that dirty laundry and hang it on a clothesline to see what's going on, because we can't have this in our community as we talk about building our community, as we talk about recovering from enslavement, as we talk about, let's say doing this research on lynching, and the book is so delayed because sometimes I'll read something and I have to go to bed. I mean, it's just some of the stuff is too much deep. Really? And so this is part of a continuum. And we as Black people cannot swim in muddy water without getting dirty. And so America is built on predatory capitalism, on patriarchy, on toxic patriarchy, and we swim in that same water. So there are Black men and women who have been abusers, and we know that. This is heartbreaking when you hear this man's voice, and I know it's artificially blah, 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 but reading between the lines, you do understand that there is pain. And in our communities, there's pain. We have rape and incest in our communities. There is pain. We can thrive as a people until we unpack the pain.
You know, Dr. Walker, certainly there's the court of public opinion, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the contrast between how Sean Combs responded to Sean Carter. Seemed as if he jumped on the case, got some of his thoughts out there very, very quickly. I wouldn't say that his reputation hasn't been damaged, but certainly it seems like it's in more control. And I'm wondering about your thoughts about his response.
So I would just, from my perspective, and I've had conversations with, the allegations against Jay-Z, and particularly is that let it play out. And he has attorneys. There's attorney he's alleging is acted improperly. So my perspective is to see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the allegations against Sean Combs, if any of us who follow hip hop, they're not surprising. Because those, you've heard those kind of rumors for years, and obviously it'll play out in a court of law eventually. But anytime you hear these allegations of sexual assault, for me, is troubling and heartbreaking. And I think it's important once again that we recognize that those individuals who've been victimized deserve a day in court or compensation, and also we have to acknowledge their humanity and the trauma they've been through. But we also have to recognize that we have a judicial system. And so, my perspective is certainly that I'm, look forward to the individuals who've been victimized having their day in court of law. And then over the next couple of months, certainly we'll see how this plays out, whether it's, as it relates to, legally or these civil cases in terms of, who's telling the truth and who's not.
Mm-hmm. Dr.
Candace,
Walker,
one thing I'd like to jump in real quickly. This is not a hip hop thing. This is not about hip hop. I mean, I'm finding that some of the majority media tries to make this into a black thing. The fact in the entertainment industry is that we see abuse. People are eager to get in there, get out there, get their stuff out there, and they're willing to make the kind of moral compromises that they probably shouldn't. And so therefore, they make themselves vulnerable. Not blaming the victim, but I'm just saying. But I object to the fact that they're trying to make this a hip hop thing. If you go to opera, you have stories about opera and how the divas in opera were exploited. Horrible stories in opera. We can look at classical music and see some of the same things. So let's just not jump into this is hip hop thing. Now, what's his name? Puffy, whatever.
Yes,
he calls himself.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, he's got a reputation. We've all heard the reputation, and that's just that. He's done some horrible things. On tape, so that's just that. But he is not hip hop. There's some wonderfully talented hip hop artists, and we don't want to tar them with the same brush, because we do know that when there are unequal levels of power, those who have the most power are able to exploit those who have the least amount of power. And often it's an incoming artist who would do anything to get his or her record on the air, and would, just saying, this does happen. So, like I said, I don't do hip hop. I'm too old, but I do have many young people who love hip hop, and I just don't want us to jump into this is hip hop thing because Puffy and Jay-Z are both being accused. Let's look at who's been accused in opera. Let's look at who's been accused, in classical. They're the stories of exploitation in the entertainment industry have no color.
Dr. Malveaux, I'm sure there's one hip hop song you like. Come on, we're gonna have to work on that. But let me talk to you, Dr. Walker, because it sounds like you have and do listen to hip hop. And I'm just wondering about, as Dr. Malveaux said, this is not about hip hop. But when we think about the Russell Simmons and the Two Seans and how they do represent hip hop in such a big way, do you think that this is going to leave a stain on its legacy, or do you get that it's making people have a bad mouth about hip hop as a whole because of the way that it is being sold? They are being sold as these representatives of the larger.
Yeah, so I think this is important, right? Because I'm a hip hop fan. I grew up in Philly, 80s and 90s, listen to hip hop. Okay. I still listen to hip hop, artists. So I would definitely describe myself as a hip hop. long-term hip hop fan, someone who's been listening to music for a long time. So I think that Dr. Malveaux is absolutely right. So societally, generally, from a larger level, we have a serious issue with sexual assault as a nation, and obviously we can go international and we talk about this issue. And it is a troubling part of the human condition that we need to eradicate. So, and then when you take it down a little further, absolutely, the music industry has a long, troubling history. Rock and roll, and not only in terms of some things we've heard now in other forms of genres, but we've also heard victims coming forward in those various other forms of kind of music. And for me specifically, as someone who grew up before it was hip hop, when it was rap music, and then Jay-Z and Sean Combs are contemporaries in terms of the same age group, and certainly and so that's why for me in particular having this conversation is so important, because there have been particularly from Black women over the last several years who said that some of the lyrics from some hip hop artists that are troubling and misogynistic. So I think that this is part of the conversation we need to have. And look, I'm saying it as a Black man, that we need to make sure we have these conversations to make sure we protect people, particularly Black women, from sexual assault. And like I said, we had to have a conversation about, masculinity, what it means to be a man, particularly what it means to be a Black man in our society, and what we need to do to make sure we protect Black women. And if brothers are not behaving properly, then we need to check them at the door.
Out of all this certainly is a message to take away, to keep that door open and continue the conversation about sexual assault, about rape, about women and men who are put in positions that they certainly never thought they would find themselves in. All right. We are going to be back right after this break. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered live here on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
On the next A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, we're talking about leveling up, or to put it another way, living your very best life. How to take a bold step forward that'll rock your world.
Leveling up is different for everybody. I think we fall into this trap, which often gets us stuck because we're looking at someone else's level up journey, what leveling up means to them. For some, it might be a business venture. For some, it might be a relationship situation, but it's different for everybody.
It's all a part of A Balanced Life. That's next on Black Star Network.
Now streaming on the Black Star Network.
I had been trying to get a record deal for a long time. When I finally got signed to the Motown record label in 2003, I was 34, 35 years old. And up until that time, I had been trying to get record deals the traditional way. You record your demo, you record your music, and you send it, to the record labels, or maybe a friend of a friend knows somebody that works for, the record label. And really chemistry was my last ditch effort at being in the music business.
How long have you been trying?
I've been trying since I was a teenager.
Wow.
And I'm grateful that it didn't. I'm grateful that it happened when it happened, because I wasn't prepared, as a teenager to embrace all that comes with a career in the music industry.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation A crowdfund on StartEngine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.
watching Roland Martin, unfiltered, deep into it, like pasteurized milk without the 2%. We getting deep. You want to turn that shit off? We doing the interview, motherfucker.
Was announced that Representative Yvette Clarke, a Democrat out of New York, is the chair-elect of the Congressional Black Caucus, and today she joins us to discuss her plans for the CBC and more. Welcome, Representative Yvette Clarke. Good to see you.
Good to be with you, Candace. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let me first start by saying congratulations. I know there's a lot of work, yet good work ahead of you. I want you to give us an idea about what are some of the top things that you will have on your list of things to do in terms of what's important to the Black community and what you're hearing from people now, especially since you have been put in this position.
Well, right now we are in the organization phase. We still have a few more weeks left in this session of Congress where Congressman Stephen Horsford remains the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. However, we are prepared to enter into the 119th session of Congress geared up and focused on really pushing back and debunking what we know will be heading our way as part of the Trump agenda to execute on Project 2025. We have members on every committee of jurisdiction. The Congressional Black Caucus will be the largest number of federal lawmakers in the history of the United States in the next session of Congress at 62 members, 4 of whom are in the United States Senate and 58 of whom are in the House of Representatives. So we are organizing in this moment to make sure that all of us, each member who sits on the various committees throughout the House of Representatives and of course the United States Senate, are fluent in the plans that were outlined in the Project 2025 document and are armed with the knowledge and information we need to be able to go right at it, to be, if you will, on the offense in educating and informing Black communities across this nation as to what these plans mean in their lives. And so that is a major part of what we'll be doing. Of course, there are a number of legacy issues that we will remain focused on and remain at the heart of our agenda, issues of voting rights, of affordable housing, issues of making sure that we advance the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act. There are a whole host, including the HR 40, which speaks to the need to do a study on reparations. We are going to continue to advance all of those issues in the House of Representatives of the United States Senate that have a direct bearing and impact on Black people across this nation.
Representative, let's fast forward to January 21st, let's say. I am wondering, in terms of the list of things that are out there when we look at Project 25, what do you think are maybe the top 2 or 3 things that you know you are going to have to address immediately? I'm wondering, is it immigration? Is it housing? There's so many things that are huge and that are affecting the lives of Black Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we know from prior experience with the previous Trump administration is that there will be a barrage of activities coming out of that administration, all of which have us centered in the bullseye of some of the most cruel policies that you can imagine. And so we are focused on making sure that we are geared up at every level to address all of the issues simultaneously. We know that Donald Trump has promised to begin a mass deportation program on day one. We know that in Project 2025, there's a deconstruction of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across this nation. And there are a whole host of other harmful policies. We will be prepared on January 21st to, first of all, again, educate and inform the people, because there has been such a propaganda campaign waged directly and targeted at Black communities to disinform and misinform about the true nature of these policies and how they adversely impact our communities. We want to make sure that we unpack that for our families, our communities, for the Black people of this nation, so that they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that they are partners in making sure that we take care of one another. This is going to be a very tumultuous time for Black communities. And again, I think that oftentimes when you're traumatized, you find ways to suppress that trauma just to be able to live, with some level of comfort. This is going to be a very uncomfortable circumstance for Black people in this nation. And we want to be there to make sure that people are given the right information and are prepared to resist against the backlash of this administration and what it means for them to target communities, vulnerable communities, such as the Black community.
As you said, prepared. That is a word that I think a lot of people are hanging their hat on. You do have to be prepared. Before I go to my panel, I want to ask you about the George Floyd Policing Act and where that is. This is certainly, that has been something that's been on the docket for years, if you will. Movement a little bit here and there. What are your hopes and plans for that?
Well, we will continue to advocate for this legislation to be passed in the House of Representatives. We don't stop because there's a trifecta where Republicans control both the House, the Senate, and the White House. We are focused on making sure that we continue to raise the issue of police accountability, police brutality across this nation, and that we have a remedy in the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act. And we will continue to introduce that legislation. We will continue to push for hearings on this legislation. We will make sure that our people are fluent in what that legislation contains and why it's so critical that we pass this legislation. It's going to take all of us to get this work done. We're going to be, of course, doing what we can as legislators, but we're going to need our partners outside of the federal government on the state and local level. We're going to need our partners in the nonprofit sector, in the civil rights community, to continue to be the echo chamber, if you will, until we are successful and victorious in passing this legislation.
All right, let me bring in my panel here. Dr. Malveaux, question for Representative Clark.
Hey, Sora, I'm loving those glasses. I truly love those glasses. You look fantastic. I was so happy to hear you mention HR 40 because we really have not, as you know, I'm on the NARC, National African American Reparations Commission, and we've been pushing with Congressman Conyers and then with, of course, our departed Sheila Jackson Lee, pushing for the passage of HR 40. We got very close, but we didn't get over the line. There are two things that I want to ask you about that. Number one, many of us are hoping that President Biden, before he leaves office, signs an executive order to implement HR 40. We know that the Orange Man is not going to, if he signs it, he'll void it. But symbolically, that's a big victory. So part one, do you think that President Biden has the cojones to do such a thing? There are no consequences to him. He's not running for office again. So that's one. And then number two, in terms of looking at the Policing Act, again, what are the numbers looking like? You've got a very slim very slim minority, but are there Republican allies that can be tilted in our direction?
Well, let me say that we are going to, and I know that we've already placed a number of requests before President Biden to ask that he act on a number of our requests prior to leaving office. I don't know that HR 40 is a part of that package, but we have been looking at the pardon process and the need to look at all of the injustice in the criminal justice system and release and pardon and provide clemency to a number of folks who have served their time and have already shown that they are prepared to come back to our communities, and that it's critical that he act at this time. With respect to the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act, as long as there is a MAGA majority in the House, whether it's a slim majority or not, we don't expect that they will pick up this legislation and move it. That does not mean that we don't continue to raise the issue of police brutality and accountability in this nation, that we continue to raise our voices, we continue to highlight the need for this, because we are the ones who ultimately bear the brunt of misconduct in police departments across this nation. So I don't by any means believe that we have those actors on the other side of the aisle that are sympathetic to this cause, because if they were, they would have already stepped up to the fore to be able to work with us to get this done. And you have to understand that in a MAGA majority, those who would have traditionally been reasonable, willing to negotiate, are also targeted within their own conference by extremists. And so that in it of itself creates a conundrum within the Republican Party for those who understand the issues that impact Black communities across this nation. They're unfortunately not ones of courage to stand up and to partner. But we will see. You know, I hope springs eternal, Dr. Malvo.
Dr. Walker.
And Clark, let me say first of all that I served as the LD for former Congressman Owens, so I know your district quite well. So I wanted to say that. And so my question goes directly relates to the issue of immigration. So we see, you talked about Project 2025 a lot. We saw the attacks with Haitians in, Ohio, among other places. And so I wanted you to talk, people often, the conversation relates to immigration to individuals from Mexico, Central and South America. And there's little context as it relates to how these immigration challenges will impact Black people, particularly those from the Caribbean or from various parts of Africa. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how these issues can disproportionately impact Black people, and then some of the things the CBC is considering?
Absolutely. And people seem to also forget that there are significant numbers of people of African descent that are residing in South and Central America as well, and who are, under extreme pressure to migrate. Given the circumstances there, people of African descent have migrated to the United States, ever since the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when quotas were lifted that prohibited Black people from immigrating to the United States of America. And even prior to that, we know the racism that impacts what I call longtime stakeholders, those who are descendant of the enslaved Africans that were kidnapped and brutalized and brought to this nation. We are all targeted as long as we are of African descent, and we have to understand that we stand out more so in the crowd of immigrants than many of the other sort of immigrant groups. There are immigrants from Ireland that are here undocumented. There are immigrants from Eastern Europe that are here that are undocumented. Yet we always see the Black and the brown who are targeted for enforcement action. So it's going to be a real hardship on our communities because of proximity to Black families. Immigrants are in blended families. Someone in the family is a citizen, someone is a resident, or someone who holds a green card, and then there's someone who may be undocumented. We are facing the existential threat of family separation. And so it is critical that we stand with our sisters and brothers who are immigrants to this nation. My parents were immigrants to this nation. And we stand up and say, not on our watch. We will not see the dehumanization of people of African descent on our watch.
Certainly a lot of people know who you are, but for those people who want to learn more about how you are going to lead the Congressional Black Caucus, how would you explain how you get things done and your leadership style?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I come out of the Shirley Chisholm School of Leadership, being a Brooklynite who's unbought and unbossed, who was an insurgent in terms of political leadership within the Brooklyn community, New York State community. And so I was raised in a household of activists. And I believe that it is critical that we organize on the ground, that we educate our communities on what exactly is taking place in Washington, D.C. at the federal level. Again, I was astounded by the level of misinformation targeted at Black communities. And so I have organized with colleagues in our executive body to look at how we structure the CBC to maximize on our power and influence in the communities across this nation to, again, mobilize our people, educate and inform them, and make sure that we are not used by the Trump administration in a divide and conquer strategy that diffuses our power, but that we lift each other up in this moment, that we undergird each other. And so I believe in Black empowerment. And that is how I am focusing the work that our colleagues will be doing and getting the buy-in, quite frankly, from all of the CBC members as we move forward. We understand what time it is. And what is so unique about the CBC in 2024 is that we were founded by 13 members of Congress who came from voting rights districts. And in 2024, we have many more members of Congress who represent districts that are not majority Black districts, but have lived experiences of Black people. And so we're going to use all of the talent at our disposal. We're going to use all of the benefits of those lived experiences to really connect across this nation with Black folks who may not even live in our constituencies, but who understand that democracy is not a spectator sport, that we have to be in this, that we have to recognize that this is not a moment, this is a movement, and that we have to center ourselves to come through these next few years under the Trump administration victorious. And that's what we're going to do from day one, coming out of going into the 119th session of Congress.
All right, from day one, with an unprecedented number of African Americans serving in the House and the Senate, a lot of good work ahead, and we'll have you back to get an update on that. Thank you so much for being with us today, Representative Yvette Clarke. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me, Candace.
Absolutely.
And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa to everyone.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for that. And congratulations to you once again.
Thank you.
All right, you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered live here on the Black Star Network. Stay with us. We'll be back after a break.
Now streaming on the Black Star Network.
I had been trying to get a record deal for a long time. You know, when I finally got signed to the Motown record label in 2003, I was 34, 35 years old. And up until that time, I had been trying to get record deals the traditional way. You know, you record your demo, you record your music, and you send it, you know, to the record labels, or maybe somebody, a friend of a friend, knows somebody that works for, you know, the record label. And really, chemistry that was my last ditch effort at being in the music business.
How long have you been trying?
I've been trying since I was a teenager. Wow. You know? And you know, and I'm grateful that it didn't. I'm grateful that it happened when it happened, because I wasn't prepared, you know, as a teenager to embrace all that comes with a career in the music industry.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
This is Tamala Mann.
And this is David Mann. And you're watching Roland Martin
Unfiltered.
She is switching parties to become a Republican, talking about Florida State Representative Susan Valdez. Now, in a statement, she says, "I will not waste my final 2 years in the Florida legislature, being ignored in a caucus whose leadership expects me to ignore the needs of my community. Effective immediately, I will change my registration from Democrat to Republican and will join the Republican conference in the Florida House of Representatives." She noted, "I know that I won't agree with my fellow Republican House members on every issue, but I know that in their caucus, I will be welcomed and treated with respect." Talk about a little bit of a bait and switch. Listen, Dr. Malveaux, I think this is just a disservice to those constituents who voted for her, first and foremost. Oh, I think Dr. Malveaux?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that is all right. I was saying that when it comes to Susan Valdez doing a bit of a bait and switch, going from Democrat to Republican down there in Florida, you know, her constituents must certainly be upset that she did this.
Well, her constituents are upset, I'm sure, because they voted for her as a Democrat because she claimed to embrace democratic principles. But I would also say that this illustrates some of the challenges that the Democratic Party now has. As Yvette spoke about, Congresswoman Clark spoke about earlier, you know, the margins are razor thin, but Republicans are in the majority. I'm sure this woman doesn't like being in a minority. And in Florida especially, there has been an insensitivity, especially to around immigrant issues, which I'm sure she actually does embrace. I think that she's a wuss, quite frankly. Oh, there I go again. But I think she's a wuss. I think she, you know, you ran as a Democrat, you stick with the Democrats. But I think the flip side of that is, what will Democrats do now? Not just because of her, but because of the very narrow ways that we lost. We lost Wisconsin on less than 30,000 votes. What are we prepared to do to win the good graces of voters who lean Democratic but are sick of some of the Democratic drama? So Susan Valdez was reelected as a Democrat. She's now saying she's going to be Republican. I think that move lacks integrity, but I think it also speaks to the weaknesses of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and I also think it speaks to the weaknesses, Dr. Walker, of just the system that is in place. Certainly, she has her own agency to do what she wants, but for someone to have gone through the process, get voted in as a Democrat, and then switch over to be a Republican, it can almost be seen as a strategy, a plan for for other people who find themselves being voted on a Democratic ticket.
Yeah, so in the previous segment, I talked about me working on Capitol Hill, and when members of local, state, or federal politics make these moves, this is something they have already planned. This is not something that happens in a vacuum or at the last minute. These are conversations that are ongoing for some time, and for her constituents in particular, when you switch parties like this weeks after an election, it's an interesting in terms of the overall message you're sending. And so, and it's the other thing is it's difficult for someone who's is an incumbent to kind of determine when people are going to make these kind of moves. If we remember a couple months ago, we saw something similar in North Carolina. The difference in North Carolina is that it shifted the power base from Democrats to Republicans and had an impact on policy in the state of North Carolina. In the state of Florida, the Republican Party has supermajority, so it's in the governor's mansion. So it's not going to have necessarily a policy impact, but also it gets more issues about morality and right or wrong, and making these kind of moves certainly should have been clear prior to not even just the election, but the primary. That this is the kind of change that you were anticipating move, and to make it just a few weeks after the election. Certainly, like I said, our constituents certainly have to be upset, and it's a political move.
Yeah, and I want to go back to your experience on Capitol Hill. When we talk about the power that someone actually has when they switch a party like this, do they have any? I would imagine that it takes them a very long time in order to garner power, garner respect, and let people see them as somebody as integrity for someone who's done this type of switch, Dr. Walker.
So, let me also, I think this is a good question, but let me add that, when it comes to these kind of party switches, people aren't checking anyone's integrity. Let's be honest.
Okay.
Right. So this is about power, right? Mm-hmm. And so if the Democrats had the majority, I'm sure she wouldn't be making this move, but they aren't. So certainly it will, making this affiliation change will open doors possibly now and down the line. I'm sure, in terms of the political calculus, all the things we described or considered. So it's unfortunate, and right, people like that make these kind of switches after a general election should face consequences. But the reality is, besides, I saw that some of the Democrats sent out letters, obviously concerned and angry, but because also she was funded through the Democratic Party.
That's right.
And so to win elections. So, there should be some kind of, like I said, some consequence. But in this case, and many of the other similar cases, there frequently isn't.
Yeah, a curious case, especially.
Let's call out Joe Manchin. Let's call out. I mean, we've seen this crap before.
Yes.
Where people claiming integrity switch parties or become independent because they don't like what's going on. And really what they want is attention. Now, I think, Dr. Larry, in her case, as you say, with the Republicans having a supermajority in Florida, I don't see what she gets out of this except for attention. And I'm not sure how much attention even then that she will get, because frankly, she's going to be one in a few dozen Florida Republicans. She doesn't get anything. She'd get more if she stayed Democrat and was a thorn in the Democrat side. But we have to look at Joe Manchin. We have to look at so many others, Sinema, who basically got elected as Democrats, used Democratic Party resources, DNC resources to become elected, and then basically wussed out. And, Manchin got a lot of attention because because Democrats had such a slim majority. He got a lot of attention, a lot of whatever, a lot of smoke blown, up him. But,
sure.
but this woman, I don't think is going to get the same. They may welcome her because, of her demographic.
Mm-hmm.
There may be other reasons they welcome her, but she's not going to get as much attention or clout as Manchin had in the United States Senate.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Malveaux and Dr. Walker, thank you for your notes on that. I wanted to move on to another subject. Supermarkets. All right. When you go to the grocery store, the proposed merger between supermarket giants Kroger and Albertsons face a major setback as judges in two separate cases blocked the deal. U.S. District Court Judge Adrian Nelson issued a preliminary injunction after a 3-week hearing in Portland, Oregon. Kroger and Albertsons, who announced the $24.6 billion merger in 2022, touted it as the largest grocery store merger in United States history, claiming it would enhance their ability to compete with major retailers like Walmart, Costco, and Amazon. But the Federal Trade Commission filed a lawsuit earlier this year, urging Nelson to stop the deal until the FTC's in-house administrative judge could review the merger. Now, here to talk more about this is Morgan Harper. She is with the American Economic Liberties Project. Morgan, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yes, thank you so much for being with us today. Listen, everyone is talking about the prices of eggs, the price of butter. When we talk about the merger of these stores, we are talking about two companies that said, hey, once you merge us, those prices will go down. But there certainly were not enough people, and certainly not the judges, and certainly not a lot of people who spoke out about this, who lived in the community, because they did survey a lot. They said, we don't want it. We do not trust it. Now, as we know, Albertsons is now suing Kroger. There are so many moving parts in this. Can you break down a little bit about where we are right now with this case?
Yeah, so this was a huge deal for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, you've named the primary reason is that we're all facing such high prices in food at the grocery store. And so having two giants in the grocery industry that were going to join together, that would just give them more pricing power and the ability to charge us whatever they want and then also pay their workers as little as they want. So the fact that we saw both a federal district judge and a state court judge, like you said, that ruled in the same way, agreeing with the Federal Trade Commission that this deal was anti-competitive is a big deal to, one, protect our ability to somehow try to control prices. Not to say that prices are going to go down right away at all because of the blocking of this merger, but that it's maintaining competition. And here's why this was pretty important for just like an antitrust law perspective, because the argument the Federal Trade Commission was making is that, hey, you guys, Kroger and Albertsons, you want this to be considered a national market. Like you said, that they're competing with Walmart, they're competing with Amazon, they're competing with Costco, they're competing with everyone. And the FTC's argument was, that's not true. You're actually competing with each other if we look at this market of supermarkets that are in the same geography. And that's what we learned in this case in the trial, that oftentimes Kroger and Albertsons are down the street from one another. And so if that becomes the same store, well, then of course is going to impact the level of competition in the defined market. So that was a really big insight there. And then also rejecting this idea, as you said, that somehow in getting bigger, in antitrust, it's called merge to compete, that you're going to be able to compete with these big giants. Well, that's completely irrelevant for purposes of antitrust legal analysis. And it was good to see the federal judge here reject that in her opinion.
Yeah, in the process of putting this type of a merger together, there were billions of dollars at stake, certainly. And from what I understand, maybe almost $1 billion to even work up to make this happen, which is why now Albertsons is suing Kroger. What do you think about that and the outcome of that lawsuit?
Well, what that indicates is they're unlikely to be appealing this decision. I mean, it's very much an option when you see that a judge has decided against allowing a merger to go through, that the parties would appeal, take that to a circuit court and try their luck with a different set of judges. But here, the fact that we see Albertsons suing, that pretty much means that these parties are done with each other. They're not looking to proceed. And I think that is because we saw both a federal judge and a state judge decide against them. The writing's kind of on the wall. This is done. Like you said, they've already put a lot of money into this, and now they're trying to point the finger at each other and cut their losses with as much as they can.
Yeah. And you know what, Morgan, I want to point out that the reason that Albertsons is suing Kroger is because there were a lot of regulatory guidelines that they said were in the hands of Kroger that they did not do completely or effectively. And because of that, they pointed that to that reason as to why this merger was not approved.
Yeah, and what they're getting at there is, that Kroger had they're claiming that Kroger had the opportunity to make certain adjustments to this deal, to the transaction that would have satisfied the Federal Trade Commission and potentially allowed them to settle. And for example, in what, not in the Albertsons complaint right now, but what came up during the trial and throughout the couple of years that this transaction's been under scrutiny, is they decided one of their proposals to the Federal Trade Commission was, we're going to divest to this entity called CNS. We're going to divest some of the stores. Then there'll be this third entity in addition to Kroger and Albertsons that's going to be operating in the grocery space. And that should assuage any concerns that the FTC has about lack of competition from these two, from Kroger and Albertsons coming together. The problem with that is that CNS has no real experience in operating supermarkets. In fact, in a prior deal a few years ago in 2015, when they were similarly given some stores through a divestment to try to get approval for a transaction, those stores all went under. So there was plenty of evidence to suggest CNS was not the right entity if you're trying to make this argument to the court that this divestiture was going to be sufficient. And perhaps that did show some arrogance from Kroger, which they've kind of been showing for the last few years, that they kind of charge consumers whatever they want. Their workers are fine. They treat workers better than anybody else, and they're going to go forward with this transaction regardless of, whatever the winds are telling them. So, hard to be too sympathetic with Kroger here, but certainly not a huge shock that we landed with this outcome of two judges blocking the transaction.
Right. Now, we've got listeners all over the world. Can you talk a little bit about the footprint? I mean, I'm from New Jersey. There's not a Kroger's here. There's not an Albertsons. I can definitely say that because I'm always all up and down the turnpike. But the footprint of it, for people who don't understand it, very large. I mean, if you go south of the Mason border, or out west a little bit further, you are going to see these stores.
Absolutely, and it's an important point. They would have been actually the largest grocery retailer in the country. And so, I'm in Ohio. Kroger's based in Ohio. They have a huge footprint in Ohio, and this is another thing to keep in mind. And we call it, the illusion of choice. It seems like there are a lot of different brands operating, but actually between Kroger and Albertsons, they have brands under those umbrellas, like Vons, for example. If anybody's ever gone to Southern California, that's a very common grocery brand. That is a Kroger brand. Albertsons, is associated, they own Safeway brand. And so you might be seeing different names when you go to the store, but these are the same companies. And this transaction in particular really focused on some of the overlapping markets in the Western region where Kroger's and Albertsons both have a big footprint. So Washington State, California, Colorado. And that's why we also saw the state attorneys general from those states that have brought their own cases. The Washington Attorney General was successful yesterday as well. And that's where we also saw a lot of local unions that were speaking out against this merger from the start, saying, we've been here before. These companies have made promises to us, for example, when Safeway and Albertsons combined several years ago, that there weren't going to be layoffs, that they weren't going to close stores. It was all a lie, and the jig is up. And so we are speaking out against. So they formed a coalition of hundreds of organizations all across the country, of unions, advocates, different small businesses. I mean, that's another dynamic here that's important to keep in mind, that independent grocery retailers that are trying to stay in business and compete would also have been harmed from this merger, and they are part of the coalition. So a really diverse set of folks that were speaking out because of the really big footprint that both Kroger and Albertsons have, especially in the western part of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I go to my panel, I have one more question for you, and that is that you're right. Certainly, the attorney generals of several states spoke out. The attorney general of Colorado, I believe I saw him live on YouTube answering questions, and he was really talking about the power of the people, and that there are a lot of people that they surveyed and spoke to, and they just didn't want that. And I'm sure that had some impact too. The people who would tend to go to these stores and buy, they just didn't want this to happen either. And certainly that carries a lot of weight.
Yeah, absolutely. The Colorado AG held listening sessions. Actually, Phil Weiser had held listening sessions through his district. Lena Khan, who's the current chair of the Federal Trade Commission in Washington, flew out to Colorado. She participated in some of those listening sessions. And they're hearing directly from consumers, and again, importantly, from workers that were saying this merger is not in our best interest. This is going to harm us. And that certainly helped to lay the foundation for their eventual lawsuit to block the merger.
All right, I want to go to my panel now, open up the floor to Dr. Malveaux. A question for Morgan.
Hey, Morgan.
Appreciate your work on this because it's really important to basically break up what would have been a potential monopoly with no competition, and with no competition, obviously much higher prices. So it's good that the regulators came in and said, no, this isn't going to happen. But what do you see? This move towards consolidation is happening not only in the grocery industry, but in others. What do you see happening next in terms of groceries, in terms of it? I love the fact that you laid out what's under Albertson, what's under Kroger. So we just think of those two. There's so much more. What do you think is going to happen in the next year around consolidation in the grocery industry?
Well, it's a great question. The grocery industry is already consolidated, so there aren't a ton of other players besides Kroger and Albertsons that might be seeking to combine. And, certainly with this transaction and how much money we've already discussed has been spent on it, I don't know if I would predict that Kroger or Albertsons is going to be going back to the market trying to make another combination happen. But I think something for us to be looking out for, obviously there's going to be a change in administration. This case was brought under Chair Lina Khan's leadership, and President-elect Trump has just announced his pick for the next chair of the Federal Trade Commission, a man named Andrew Ferguson, who is a current Republican commissioner, but would now, and actually he doesn't even need to be confirmed, he's already said confirmed, he's going to be elevated to be the chair and have decisions ultimately over what kind of cases are brought, et cetera. And so, I think we have some early signs that he is interested in kind of these market structure questions, but so far it seems like just in the tech industry, unlikely to be in this one. I think the really important thing for us to look out for, both in the behavior of Kroger and Albertsons moving forward and just how they're conducting business with us as consumers, and also what the Federal Trade Commission might do, is their focus on pricing. So apart from the Kroger Albertsons litigation, this FTC has also launched an investigation into different surveillance pricing tactics, especially in the grocery space. There was reporting a few months ago how Kroger was exploring the use of dynamic pricing in the grocery store, meaning that there would not be one set price for a given item. Your favorite tomato sauce might be $3 for you, but Kroger knows it's actually my extra favorite sauce. They're going to try to charge me $4, for example, so that, prices could change a lot like we see with, Uber and rideshare. And so, they got immediate pushback on that, as I think we all understand. But that's the kind of thing, that I would hope that we would see from this next leadership of the Federal Trade Commission, is continue that work to investigate how are companies using our data against us, really, to further increase inflation and cost of living. And certainly the grocery market is a space where, any further increase is going to be really harmful to a lot of us across the country.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Walker. All right, maybe we don't have Dr. Walker, and that's all right. I think that when we talk about antitrust, when we talk about making sure that people are able to just fairly compete, I think about the case of Google, right? And we talk about the antitrust. This is something that the government, they are on the case to make sure that capitalism does not exist in this way. What do you think might happen in terms of the next when Donald Trump takes office? Do you see that this might change in any way, shape, or form?
Certainly anything is on the table for change when we have a new administration. And I do think we're seeing a lot of mixed signals from some of President-elect Trump's choices so far in nominees. But again, the chair of the Federal Trade Commission, Andrew Ferguson, he, especially when you talk about the tech industry, has been pretty outspoken about wanting to be aggressive in considering what are called structural remedies to change the business model, or go after enforcement actions that might result in a change in business model to some of these companies. Mark Meter is another Republican commissioner who has now been nominated and will still have to be Senate confirmed. He is coming from Senator Mike Lee's staff in the U.S. Senate, a Republican, but another person who has been outspoken and critical of the tech industry and their market power. The Google case, though, that there are a couple Google cases that are live, but there's one against Google on their Google search that's now
Yes.
at the remedy stage. And, that's already with the judge to decide on what those remedies are going to look like, if they're going to have to divest Chrome, for example. But, a new administration could decide that they don't want to continue with that case. And, unlikely because it's already so far along. But we do have a sign also there for the DOJ antitrust nominee coming from a strong background in critiquing tech, and was previously, her name is Gail Slater, was previously on Vice President-elect J.D. Vance's staff, that also has been kind of critical of tech. I mean, I think it's important to clarify. Oftentimes, a lot of the folks from the Republican Party that are critiquing tech are using justifications like wanting to stop censorship, and maybe
Yes.
different than from where a lot of Democrats are coming from. But the main point is they're all landing on the same conclusion, which is these companies have too much market power and they need to be broken up or structurally changed. And so, there's positive signs on, I would say, both fronts for the antitrust enforcers, DOJ and FTC, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see how it all fits into the political calculations that the next administration's making.
All right. I want to thank you so much for giving us insight. Listen, a lot going on in the world of supermarkets. Never knew it could be so interesting. Morgan Harper with the American Economic Liberties Project. Thank you so much for being with us today. All right. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the news that's affecting you. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered here live on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
Now streaming on the Black Star Network.
I had been trying to get a record deal for a long time. When I finally got signed to the Motown record label in 2003, I was 34, 35 years old. And up until that time, I had been trying to get record deals the traditional way. You record your demo, you record your music, and you send it, to the record labels, or maybe a friend of a friend knows somebody that works for, the record label. And really chemistry that was my last ditch effort at being in the music business.
How long have you been trying?
I've been trying since I was a teenager. Wow. And I'm grateful that it didn't. I'm grateful that it happened when it happened, because I wasn't prepared, as a teenager to embrace all that comes with a career in the music industry.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
Henry Louis Gates says there are 42 million Black people in America. Therefore, there are 42 million ways of being Black.
We are not a monolithic people. We come in all different shades, sizes, everything.
For me, Black excellence is the upgrade to any level of excellence.
It looks like a family who is beautiful and proud of being together, that have degrees or no degrees.
I like that it's creativity. I like that it's self-expression. I like that it's radical at times.
There we go. And because we've been through so much and endured so much, and
we gonna go through some things, but we don't stay in it, And
the intensive labor to educate you about the systems your ancestors built is not always my obligation.
I promise you, you will love it, comrades. Join the community.
I'm Russell L. Honoré, Lieutenant General, United States Army, retired, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
confirmed her candidacy for mayor, aiming to become the first Black woman to lead the city if elected. In her announcement, Sheffield emphasized priorities including affordable housing, increased funding for home repairs, and job creation, particularly for young people. Public findings show she has an early edge in fundraising and name recognition among the potential candidates. But Sheffield is not the only Black woman entering the race. Former Detroit City Council President Chantel Jenkins is also expected to announce her candidacy soon. Listen, I think that looking at this, we've got two very interesting candidates. One, perhaps, Dr. Malveaux, was slightly a little more name recognition, but the fact that they're both out there, the fact that they're both Black women is going to send both of them rising to the top. Dr. Malveaux?
Oh, this is exciting. Detroit has not had a woman mayor. We've obviously had several Black mayors of the mighty legacy of Coleman Young remaining there. Lots of really committed Black women activists in Detroit. And so basically, let the best sister win. What I think that both of them are going to have to understand and deal with, first of all, is a political climate where the incoming president has vowed to take cities in hand. He's talked a lot of nonsense about Washington, D.C. He's also talked a lot of nonsense about Southern California cities, notably Los Angeles. And so both women have to be very aware of that. Secondly, although Detroit is on the upswing, it hasn't always been, there are still major challenges in terms of home abandonment and things like that. I like the fact that both of them are looking at possibilities of supplementing or providing grants for people to improve their homes, because there's the level of home abandonment in Detroit is really frightening. Some blocks, half of the homes have been abandoned. So there's a lot of work to be done. I really don't know a lot about either candidate. They both look compelling, but the issue is not how they look, it's what the voters want. And I think in Detroit, voters are very interested, very, very interested in seeing an upswing, in the interest of Coleman Young and others. And then I think the other thing about Detroit that I always love is the strong union base. And so it'll be interesting after the Teamsters sat out of the 2024 presidential election to see if they plan to play a role in this one.
Yeah, Mary Sheffield, Dr. Walker, comes from a long line of political figures. I think what's very interesting about this is when you look at the race, when we normally have a Black woman in a race, that is the distinguishing factor, that you have a Black woman against somebody else who may be or probably of non-color. Here you have two African-American women. How does one distinguish themselves in this type of race when it comes to campaigning, working with others? What do you say? How would you deal with that on Capitol Hill based upon your experience? As for Dr. Walker. Oh, Dr. Walker is a little frozen. That's okay. You know what? Dr. Malveaux, are you still with us?
I'm still here, yes.
It comes down.
Oh, okay. You know what, Dr. Walker, let me open that up to you. There you go.
Technology is imperfect this evening. That's all I can say. So listen, I think that really it's important, right? I speaks to, we just had Congressman Clark on, and we made a mention of, we had to talk about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I mentioned that because this having two Black women, in a majority Black city run against each other speaks to the success of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So I think it's exciting. Certainly, as Dr. Malveaux mentioned, Detroit's on upswing. We know that last year there was a decrease in violent crime. It's a wonderful city, wonderful people. And so I'm very excited to see who wins. But like I said, Detroit is definitely on the upswing. And particularly considering some of the challenges at the federal level with the transition, we want to make sure that, these majority Black cities like Detroit are well represented, and both these candidates are well qualified. And I look forward to seeing who's going to win the election.
Yeah, and let me end this by saying, there are some things that they'll have to do in order to get people's attention. If you were managing them, Dr. Malvo, what would you say they should do in order to distinguish themselves as they go out there? Again, it is a black base, two black women. How do you make yourself unique?
Well, I think they're both unique individuals. They both have different legislative and other histories, as you mentioned. Candidate Sheffield comes from a long line of activists. I think that the most important thing for them is going to be endorsements. I think that people like Reverend Wendell Anthony, who's a big former president of the NAACP in Detroit, he got that membership up to 10,000. If somebody could get him in their corner, imagine the impact of that. There are many others, Benny Napoleon. So I think that endorsements are going to make a difference. I also think that the ground game is going to make a difference. What we also know is that because of the enormous activism that Black women demonstrated in the 2024 presidential, there are lots of spinoffs from Win with Black Women and other groups. And I would say that, while sisters are not going to engage in any kind of BS, that if either of them is able to get those Black women activist organizations in their corner, it will make a difference. Lavonia Perriman has a radio show in Detroit. The reparations issue, which germinated from Congressman Conyers with HR 40. If either of them is willing to embrace that may make a difference. They will have to go issue by issue. And this is an exciting race to me because, a lot of people will vote race and gender, but if they're both the same race and same gender, how do they distinguish themselves? And that's a big question.
Yeah, indeed it is. So listen, as we close, I wanted to shift a little bit. This certainly was not one of the topics that we had planned to discuss, but it's come up so much this evening. I wanted to take at least 5 minutes to touch upon this, and that has to do with reparations. We've mentioned it quite a bit this evening. Dr. Malvo, I know that you are on a reparations committee. You are working on some writing so that you can publish a book about reparations and other things. I wanted you to give our audience an update about where you think reparations stands. You would know best, and especially going into the new this new election year with a new president. What are your hopes for it?
Well, I hope that we get reparations. I mean, economic justice means reparations. It means giving us what was taken from us. I mean, when we look at the history of this United States, we were never on a level playing field. After enslavement, however, we saw improvement in our economic status that as soon as about 1910 went away. So I am hoping, First Repair, which was founded by the brilliant Robin Ruth Simmons, former Evanston, Illinois councilwoman, who Evanston was the first city to provide people with cash reparations because of redlining. And there were over 200 people at her gathering, about 60 municipalities represented. People really looking at the ways that Black people have been stifled in our attempt to get economic parity. Don't get me started, Candace, because I could go line, chapter, and verse about what I call economic lynching. Economic lynches. People were lynched because they had too much. There's the story of Anthony Crawford, who owned 400 acres of what they call good cotton land. And he went to sell some cottonseed to the general store. The white man offered him 5 cents a pound less than the white man who went before him. And he said, I'd rather throw my damn cottonseed in the river than to be ripped off. Well, at that time, using curse words at white people, which is why I curse so much, using curse words at white people could get you lynched or something. He was arrested because he cursed at the white man. Now, he cursed his own cottonseed. He didn't curse white people. Anyway, he went in his pocket. The fine was $15, which is a lot of money then. He went in his pocket, threw the $15 at the sheriff, so they lynched him anyway. And the two white competitors who competed with him about cottonseed, they were named executors of his estate.
Let me ask you this. the committee
Yes,
that
ma'am.
the committee that you are on right now, well, what are your plans for 2025 to see reparations come into fruition?
It's the National African American Reparations Commission. It's part of the Institute of the Black World. It's convened by Dr. Ron Daniels, forgive me. We think it's going to have to be local with this Congress. We don't expect much from them, but with people like Yvette Clarke and others, in our corner, we expect that'll come up again and again and again. But meanwhile, the local reparations movement is there. There are some foundations, progressive foundations, who are helping to make the case for reparations. We want reparations to be like a household word. It's not right now. A lot of black people don't support reparations. They're like, let's just let things, let sleeping dogs lie. But we want it to be a national and an international movement, and indeed it is. We had people from CARICOM at the conference last weekend. The Caribbean Commission, and they are looking at the reparations issue. So our hope is that people will embrace this out of a sense of fairness, out of a sense of fairness. It is unfair to have taken our land, our labor, and labor, talent. There's so many stories of Black folks who have patents. They took our intellectual capability. So we just want this to be, we don't have any false hopes about the next Congress.
Okay.
But we do hope that President Biden will do an executive order, which he still can do.
Now, Dr.
All
Walker.
righty. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's all right. That's why I asked the question, Dr. Walker. I want to give you the last 30 seconds in terms of, do you think that a needle is being moved in terms of reparations, and will it be stopped if it is moving when we get this new president in office officially?
Yeah, I see, our nation's largest state has seen some movement, right? We know what happened with Governor Newsom.
Yes.
But, this is an important topic, and, we have to have, you have to, make sure the individuals who suffer under the boot of systemic racism are properly compensated.
All right. Listen, Dr. Walker, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, as always, good to have you and see you. Great conversation. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Candace.
All right.
Great job.
Absolutely. All right. You've been watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and I'm Candace Kelly. Have a good evening. Roland Martin will be back tomorrow. Have a good night.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?